Well, welcome everybody. I really appreciate y'all joining us today. I was really touched by the opportunity to try to pull together this panel. So I thought I would just bring together some of my heroes in the whistleblower advocacy world, some people that I've known for a long, long time, so that we can discuss this important topic that perhaps is more important now than ever. And a lot of these people you probably know. If you don't know them, you should. You can Google them or look at the bios that were provided for today's session. Going in whatever order I feel like, Siri Nelson, newly appointed Executive Director of the National Whistleblower Center, is joining us, along with my longtime friend, Tom Devine, GAP Legal Director. Also joining us today is Danielle Bryan, Executive Director at POGO, and a new friend of mine. I don't know until today, but I look forward to getting to know her, Marcel Reed, who is the one of the organizers of the Whistleblower Summit and Film Festival, also a whistleblower herself. So we'd love to talk to her today. And I'm Jeb White, Executive Director of Taxpayers Against Fraud. I tried to do some math before we got on today to add all the years that we've been involved in this, and my calculator broke. So it's pretty impressive, the number of years. Don't do days because it'll really hit home how old we're getting. But Siri, Tom, Danielle, Marcel, I really appreciate y'all joining us today.
Thank you, Jeb.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for inviting us, Jeb.
I just wish we could do this in person, because then maybe we'd have some drinks and food while we talk, but here we are virtually. So Tom, I'm going to start with you. I thought we'd have kind of a free-flowing conversation about whistleblower advocacy, what that means, how we can affect change, and at this time, why that's so important. So Tom, looking back over the last, you've been at this for even longer than me, what do you think has changed when it comes to whistleblower advocacy, and where are we at right now?
Well, it's been an incredibly dynamic few decades. I've been working on this for a little over 40 years. And during that time, we've had a global legal revolution in free speech rights through whistleblower protection. In the 1978, the United States was the first country in the world to have a national whistleblower law. Great Britain was the second in 1998. Now we've got 48 nations with national whistleblower laws. And that's going to go up to 62 with the European Union Whistleblower Directive passed in December 2019. There's over 100 countries with sectoral whistleblower rights. And it means that we're really riding a wave. But there's a big difference between passing those laws and having freedom of speech. Government Accountability Project just did a report with the International Bar Association that rated the laws on paper, whether they were written to provide genuine rights, or whether they were written to be traps, and then laws in reality, how they're working in practice. And we've still got a long, long ways to go. We've just started this journey. 60% of the countries don't even have any reported decisions under their whistleblower laws. And the global average is about 20% that people win their decisions on the merits. And compare that to the United States, we're at about 10%. Where the whistleblowers win their decisions on the merits. So we're not even keeping up with the rest of the world. The other thing that's happened that's just wonderful is there's been a cultural legal revolution. When I first came to GAP, whistleblowers were considered either, kind of nutty or traitors, like Benedict Arnold's and that sort of thing. There were sometimes profiles encouraged, but that was the real exception. Now they're on a popular and political pedestal. As National Whistleblower Center commissioned a study last fall, 86% of American voters want stronger rights for whistleblowers. It's almost very politically dangerous to be opposed to this right in principle. So we've come a long way on paper. We've come a long way in terms of rhetoric. Now we got to get there in terms of reality.
And that's a great spot for me to bring Danielle in. So Tom's right. We have come a long way on so many fronts, but we're not quite there on so many other areas. You know, the term whistleblower was a term that a lot of people didn't embrace many years ago. Now it's something that people view as a badge of honor, right? So where do we need to go from here to get us across that finish line that Tom talked about?
Oh, great point, Jeb. And I couldn't agree more with what Tom is talking about, having seen over the past few decades. I think there are also a couple of universes of whistleblowers who are particularly vulnerable still, and that are, you know, are sort of my priority of where we still need to go to even have the most basic rights. One is around the national security and intelligence government employees, where that is, you know, a universe of people who became very close to possibly being able to include in some of the more meaningful government employee protections, but they have been carved out now, you know, several years in a row, where those are employees who have our nation's most important secrets and may know some of the most important things to blow the whistle on, but have some of the least meaningful protections. And the other area that I think we've all seen really through COVID is really an important place is some of those OSHA enforced whistleblower protections for frontline workers, where you're seeing hospital employees, for example, or, you know, medical professionals who are trying to raise concerns about not having enough PPE. And as Tom was pointing to, they have protections, but that's a world of people who are sort of not necessarily communicated with by the OSHA, which was really not letting those employees even know about their rights. And so that is a great example of sort of the general harm that can be done when people are trying to speak up and raise voices, but their protections, when the rubber hit the road, what was happening is they were all losing their jobs.
So Siri, a member of Taxpayers Against Fraud, recently appointed to be the executive director of National Whistleblower Center. I'm so proud to say that. So where do you see us going? I mean, coming from a practitioner standpoint, now sitting in the executive director's chair at National Whistleblower Center.
Well, I mean, I think it's great that you highlight that I'm a member of TAF, because it's so important that leaders are involved in all the different communities that we work within. And I love being a member of TAF so much, especially the Young Lawyers Division, which has such great programming. So thank you. I think what we really need to do is go as broad and as furious as we possibly can. There are so many gaps in whistleblower protections worldwide, and the only way to remedy them is to look for opportunities to infuse every single law possible with whistleblower protections. We're working really closely with European partners to make sure that the implementation of the EU directive is effective. There's tons of pushback, but we're not going to give up. And we're doing the same thing in the United States. Of course, there are major problems that need to be remedied, which I'm sure the rest of us will discuss. But one thing that's really important for us to do going forward is to think creatively about opportunities to expand whistleblower protections.
So, you know, being back in this chair, so 10 years in private practice. Before that, I was with TAF. Now I'm back. They brought me back in, and they won't let me leave, so they've handcuffed me to this chair. Sometimes, you know, when dealing with policy and advocacy, we tend to forget that there's real people involved here, right? There's whistleblowers whose livelihoods are at stake when they step forward. And Marcel, I love that you've joined us on this panel to highlight that very important point. Do you have something to say about this point?
Absolutely. Well, the summit is in place to be a nexus between all of these different elements of whistleblowing. So we try to bring in both the press, we try to bring in members of media, whether it be Hollywood. This year, for instance, we're having someone who is the godfather of whistleblowers in Atlanta when it comes to the music industry, because we never look at that and we never consider it. And it's been my mission, Tom can tell you since I got here, to make whistleblowing accessible to everyone. Not that something that's just for federal employees or for people that are 2 steps away from the general public, because I think it's important, one, that people see whistleblowers as someone like themselves. And number 2, I think it's important that people understand that whistleblowing is a responsibility. We've recently come up with the Creed. I hope the rest of you like it. And we call it the Whistleblower Creed, which we brought up Acorn 8, and that is truth, transparency, and accountability are the only things that make democracy survive and justice attainable. And I represent a group of people where justice is elusive. And I want to bring whistleblowing in as just another level of trying to reach justice, attainable justice.
You know, the power of storytelling is so important, right? So the ability to take your story and other whistleblower stories and tell that to the world so that it inspires other people. Such an admirable goal for the Whistleblower Summit. That's great. So Tom, we have a very divided Congress right now. It can't get more divided, right? Literally right down the middle on the Senate side. How can we get anything done on Capitol Hill when things are so divided? How can we inspire legislators to do the right thing?
Well, I think the first resource is solidarity. When you've got 86% of the voters, we've got a petition with 275 NGOs and corporations. They're all urging Congress that the voters still have the bipartisan commitment to freedom of speech that exposes abuses of power that betray the public. How about the politicians having a bipartisan commitment to that? And then appealing to the self-interest of the minority party right now, the Republicans, who were spooked a little bit during the last administration by their support for whistleblowers because of the political fighting. We're in a period of unprecedented federal spending. There's never been such a boost of trillions and trillions of dollars of new spending that are going to be administered by the government. And I would think that both parties have a real vested interest in seeing that we have unprecedented oversight for all that new spending. And on June 29th, Congress had a chance in the House to make the first step towards that by upgrading the rights of federal civil service workers who are going to be overseeing that money to the same level as corporate whistleblowers, giving them access to court and jury trials, protection against retaliatory investigations, witch hunts, an ability to get temporary relief while their cases drag on for 5 to 10 years sometimes. If we cement those additional rights, we're going to have a lot more effective oversight that I think both parties really, really want to achieve.
It's so interesting you say that, Tom. So, you know, in the world that I primarily operate in the False Claims Act world, right, our champions are on both sides of the aisle. This idea that government dollars should be spent correctly and appropriately, and we want to make sure that it's not going to fraud, waste, and abuse, resonates with both parties. But sometimes the message gets lost because of political leanings or stories told by certain parties looking to cater to the extreme. So I really appreciate that point. Solidarity is so important. Siri, I'm going to go to you on this one. So this idea of making sure that we all stand together on these issues. What does the National Whistleblower Center do to make sure that all people, all parties view this as an important issue?
Relationship building is a major priority for National Whistleblower Center. So we do as much public engagement and interorganizational engagement as we can. That is in the form of sending letters to other organizations to get their input and find out if there needs to be edits and if people are willing to join in on those letters so we can express joint support for it. That includes talking with whistleblowers about what they think is important and having really good advisors who are actually whistleblowers on our team, and just reaching out and trying to foster a sense of community so that when we can take action, we do it together, because we've seen that doing so really generates results. It's a major priority.
Tom said it earlier, right? The spending, I have in front of me some of the information about this infrastructure bill, right? I mean, the dollar amounts, you just keep putting commas and zeros and commas and zeros, trillions of dollars flowing out, but the enforcement mechanisms aren't getting larger. The DOJ civil division didn't exactly quadruple in size overnight. It's staying the same. The hose that's draining the fraud has stayed the same, right? We're draining an ocean of fraud with a garden hose, it seems at times. Danielle, with all of that concern, you can quickly become cynical. How are you able to keep moving forward given all of these mounting obstacles that we're facing?
Oh, I think that, as Tom has said, there's actually a I believe a realization in the Congress, and we're seeing it. The House is moving with legislation right now that will be absolutely essential, and we have every reason to believe that it's going to go through the Senate. I don't think in the end, now that we're into a new administration, where there's no question in the last administration, there was a real danger of the concept of whistleblowing being really sort of torn apart from its bipartisan and nonpartisan stronghold that it's had for decades. I think we're getting back to that place again where let's not argue about who is or is not a whistleblower. Let's just focus on the protections that we all know are essential to be raising concerns absolutely about spending, but also about health and safety of people around the world, not just in the United States. And I have every sense that is moving forward. We still have our champion, Senator Grassley, in the Senate, who's really looked to by all of his colleagues as the leader. As long as we have Senator Grassley saying this is important to move forward, I believe we're going to see this bill turned into law.
Yeah, I wholly agree with that, Danielle. I'm extremely optimistic about where things stand right now. Whenever you ask anybody on the Hill and elsewhere, they agree that the problem is fraud and the solution is whistleblowers. Right? I mean, at the very root. And when you talk to anybody who's hasn't been bought, they believe in that very strongly. So it's a matter of giving them the resources to step forward in a positive way. Marcel, when it comes to whistleblowers, I oftentimes when we do our show or I do talks to other potential whistleblower groups, I gave a talk recently to the Healthcare Compliance Association. So an audience full of healthcare compliance officers who are potential whistleblowers when their employers ask them to become compliant officers, not compliance officers, right? And I oftentimes, when I tell whistleblower stories, I try to say, what is the message you would give to somebody who is going to work every single day at a job where they know that company's moral compass is broken? What would you say to those whistleblowers or should be whistleblowers?
First, I would always tell them to rely on their own moral compass. I don't think anything written in any handbook supplants your own sense of right and wrong. And then I would tell them to seek counsel, which is something I didn't do. My daughter happens to be a medical compliance officer, so
There you go.
it's a very small world. I think it's really important that you ask two questions before you blow the whistle. Who will it help? And how can I do it in a way that causes the least harm? Because this has come up in my own family recently. Is blowing the whistle, when does truth telling become harmful? And I think that's the question that as whistleblowers, and we get caught in the lure of whistleblowers that we don't ask and that no one offers an answer to. So I've heard for years that truth without love is cruelty, and blowing the whistle without some concept of what it is you're trying to achieve sometimes can be harmful. So lean on your own sense of morality and ask the question, who will this help? Because ultimately, I think whistleblowing is a call to do as much good as you can for as many as you can.
Amen. We all receive those phone calls, right, from would-be or should-be or maybe whistleblowers who are reaching out for help and they don't know quite what to do. Tom, I'm sure you've received thousands of those calls over the years. What goes through your mind when you receive those phone calls, and what are some of the concerns you have for those people who are reaching out to you?
I think my most important responsibility is to make sure that they make a fully informed decision about what they're getting into. So, I tell people my first job is to try and talk you out of doing this. Not because I want to succeed, because you have a right to know what's going to be happening if you make this choice. It's one of the most significant life's crossroads choices that you'll make. It's the most significant professional life's crossroads decision. And further, you need to know what you're getting into so you don't quit in the middle. Because if you quit in the middle, it would have been better that you remain silent. The abuse of power that you're challenging will be stronger in the aftermath of withstanding your challenge, and you'll never be forgiven. It'll be an effort to destroy you for the rest of your professional life. So you need to be prepared to finish what you started. And then we've got a lot of work to do before you're ready.
Danielle, same question for you. What are some of the thought process that go through your mind when you get those phone calls?
Well, in fact, similar to Tom, our first approach is there a way that we can get this information out effectively so that we can stop the problem and you be able to remain confidential and keep your job? So we always think about, are there ways that we can get as much information out so it can be credible in a disclosure to the Congress or a public disclosure somehow, while you can stay in your job. And frankly, there are many stories of people who are throughout our institutions who have successfully done that. As we all of us as advocates know, if you don't, if you are going public in your disclosure, it is of course everything that Tom said. It is not only professionally a tremendous crossroads, but the impact, and Marcel can speak to this as well, on people's families, on their own personal health is so dramatic. We always think our first step is how can we get this information out so it can be stopped, or whatever the fraud or misconduct stopped, and let this person go on with their life and not be a whistleblower, because frankly, once you become a whistleblower, it's very hard not to be a whistleblower really for the rest of your life.
That whole idea of whistleblowing only works if the whistle is heard, right? So your point is very well taken. Danielle, to you, Siri, at National Whistleblower Center, you guys seem to do a great job of getting the word out, utilizing the press and social media and internet, something that wasn't around 20 years ago, but now it's become such a big tool for us, right? So can you talk a little bit about the importance of utilizing all these recent tools to spread the word?
I'm so passionate about this topic. This is like, oh my God. We need to make sure that every single person knows about their rights to report things when they can anonymously, because that is such a big safeguard to give people a chance to tell about this wrongdoing without having to risk everything. One of the main policy arguments that I have right now is that whistleblowers should not have to throw their lives away to blow the whistle. It's ridiculous. It's totally doesn't motivate anybody to do it. It makes the whole situation terrifying, and it normalizes retaliation. So National Whistleblower Center utilizes every avenue possible, including National Whistleblower Day, to make sure people know about their protections, because that's the best way they can utilize them. But unfortunately, even when these protections are in place, they're not always effectively offered to people. And when they aren't, people need to have good counsel. And I really, really love teaching at Northeastern University also, because I get to educate future attorneys about these protections and the value of making sure that their clients are well informed. So every avenue, from social media to traditional media to even formal education, that's something that needs to happen across the board.
Which is a great segue to you, Marcel. The film festival, the Whistleblower Summit, it's all about educating, right? Can you talk a little bit about the summit and the film festival?
Absolutely. The summit was something that we started about 9 years ago. It actually is an outgrowth of National Whistleblower Week. I believe was started by Pogo and Gap, if I'm saying it correctly. We took it over about 9 years ago, and we rebranded it the Whistleblower Summit for Civil and Human Rights, because we wanted to bring whistleblowing in line with civil and human rights, so people would understand they were just an extension of each other. And I recommend something that I just saw a couple of years ago, and that was there were 2 cards. They were survival tips for whistleblowers. Perhaps Tom or Danielle remember them. There were these 2 cards, and it said how to survive whistleblowing and what to do after you've blown the whistle, neither of which were available to me when I blew the whistle. Had I have had them, my life would be very different today. But we hand them out to people. We plan to hand them out this year at the summit. They're on our website. We invite people to reproduce them as much as they can, because I do political sloganeering as something I do to bring in income. And I've learned years ago that people don't remember more than 10 words at a time. So any little slogan that any of us know is generally 10 words or less. And we need to have a very precise way to explain to people what they need to do to protect themselves in the case of whistleblowing. And I think that those two little cards that came out were the best news that whistleblowing's had in quite a while, because you don't need to know anything except these 10 rules. And with these rules, you'll be able to blow the whistle more effectively. The summit is a place where whistleblowers, investigative reporters, advocates, and attorneys all come together. They can mingle and meet with each other. They can exchange ideas. As a matter of fact, from our last summit, we have 2 projects started, one with Netflix and 2 independent films started now. And it's all from the stories of whistleblowers. And I think that is a great thing. The more stories told, the more people understand and appreciate it. And the penetration of doing good for the right reason, I hope, will surface from this, which is how I see whistleblowing. It's not a reward, it's a duty, and it's a way that we can do it that causes the least harm.
Yes, the saying, complexity is the enemy of execution. I had a longtime mentor who said, it's got to fit on a bumper sticker, right?
Yes.
Your basic saying's got to be short and to the point. So Tom, what is the bumper sticker message that we need to get out right now?
Oh, the whistleblowers are the public's eyes and ears when the government betrays us. They're the people that we depend on to learn the truth behind the political advertising. If we don't know the truth and we're flying blind, we're liable to crash into a mountain.
Amen. So Siri, we are starting to wind down in this 30-minute sprint. Whenever we think about the path forward over the next 20 years, when it comes to whistleblower advocacy and where we're going, where do you think we're going?
I think we're going towards a more unified time with all of our organizations able to work together, and maybe some new organizations coming into the fold as nonprofits start more broadly understanding the impacts whistleblowers can have on their areas of interest. For example, John Kosiak, the former executive director of NWC, really led us into the direction of looking at climate whistleblowers and working with climate nonprofits as an avenue for future developments. And I think we're going to see more of that happening in the future in a more expansive way. And that's something I'm excited about, because it'll help everybody in society understand how whistleblowers benefit them and safeguard the things that they care about. I see whistleblowing going way more mainstream and in a positive way in the future, because we are going to be able to work together, and because we are going to be able to foster that bipartisan discussion with the legislators that we're in touch with, and make sure that they understand how important this issue is to voters.
That hit home this morning. I was working on this report that I'm going to be sending out hopefully soon. It used to be able to do this report 10 years ago in an afternoon because it was the False Claims Act. I could nerd out about the False Claims Act, the nuances of the law. Now it's SEC, IRS, CFTC, False Claims Act. It just keeps every year. Of course, all the states are coming on board with a number of programs. It does seem to be like we're heading in a direction where it's just more and more laws now are embracing the whistleblower model. Danielle, same question for you. Where do you see we're heading in the next 20 years?
I also think, in terms of unity, as Sari's pointing to, I'm hoping that we'll be moving in a direction of more unification of the various laws, because it is incredibly fraught. There are so many different whistleblower laws with different standards and different applications and different even terminologies. And so I do hope that one of the things that, once we get some of these basic protections, as Tom was describing in the current legislation, we can start moving to raising all the boats of all the different pieces of legislation or all the pieces of law that exist, So there's some common understanding. So it's less complicated for an employee to know, does this apply to me? Do I go to this person and it's protected disclosure? We need to have more clarity across the board so it's simpler for anyone who's considering being a whistleblower how to do it.
Yeah, I think that clarity is so important for all sides, even on the employer side, right? If there's clarity, it allows people to fully understand where the lines are, and that's so important for everybody. Siri, Tom, Danielle, Marcel, I appreciate you guys joining me on such short notice. I hate that it was only 30 minutes, but it was a lot of fun. I hope people got something out of this. And to the National Whistleblower Center, thank you for organizing this really important event.